All right, Craig, what is tip number 4, please?
Well, number 4. Number 4 is, this is a bit of a shorter one, learning doesn't start in year 7. So hopefully people's minds are blown. So if you think about all the misconceptions that you could name that a student may have acquired by the end of year 7, since sort of walking in September the 2nd or whatever it is, there's going to be loads. But then you pause and realise, well, they're in year 7. Well, 7, that means there's been at least 6 years before that where they've accrued as many misconceptions, as many mistakes. They've forgotten as much stuff as they could in that 1 year, times by 6. And the danger then is that we don't realise that, and you get to year 11, and you meet hard-working students that have good attendance, that still don't know their times tables, that still count on their fingers, like I'm doing now, but still, when adding lists of numbers, don't jump to the number bonds first that make their life easier, don't really know what a fraction represents. And I suggest that they've been taught too high. It's so easy to grab, when you teach year 7, your long-term plan or scheme of work or whatever it is, and go, right, this is where our course starts, this is where learning starts for these students. I've not seen them before, sort of out of sight, out of mind. This must be where we begin. But there's just so much that they could have mislearnt, forgotten before you, that you have to go beyond or backwards from year 7 and start looking at primary. I'm going to highlight this point with an example that I first heard Vicky Priddle talk about, that I spoke about with our head teachers a few months ago, and that Kira Mackle spoke to our HODs about, which is counting. Like, if you ask, I'm probably going to say anyone, but certainly secondary school maths teachers, what does it take to count? Well, you do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and that's how you count. But there's 5 components to counting. This blew my mind. So there being a stable order. In fact, it has to go 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't go 1, 4, 5. That's one thing, fine. One-to-one correspondence. In fact, you can count objects. So 1 object, 2 objects, 3. The object isn't the number 3, but it can be the third one. And now the next 3, I think, is where it gets a bit more interesting. So cardinality. The idea that by the time you've counted the third object, not only are you at position 3, there are 3 objects in total now. So 3 is one place on a number line, but it has a size to it. And to me, that links to jumping from counting your fingers to jumping in one go. If you think of 3 as 1, 2, 3, or 17 as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 17, you're always going to count on your fingers, either forwards or backwards. If you haven't understood cardinality, you're not going to know you can make those jumps. So where we see these gaps in year 11 still, I think it's because we haven't addressed the gaps from primary. The next one, order irrelevance. If I give you 7 objects and say, Craig, how many objects can you see here? Well, you'll count 7 objects. And if I were to rearrange them and say, how many are there now? You would hopefully say 7. Some people would have to count them again.
Yeah.
Well, that links to commutativity. If they haven't got that concept, and we never teach this explicitly, cardinality, order irrelevance, the 5th one is abstraction. The idea that sort of anything can be counted. And also one thing can be multiple numbers at the same time. So if I have a group of 5 objects, well, it can be one group, or it can be 5 things at the same time. If I think about a fraction 3/7, is that 3 of something? Or is it less than 1 of something? Well, it's both at the same time. And that idea of abstraction, again, so this is just counting. There's going to be a whole wealth of these things at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 that lead up to things at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. And if we aren't teaching at the periphery of what students already know, they're not going to learn anything. So this is why you get students in year 11 that can't do their times tables or add efficiently, because they spent their whole time learning from year 7 upwards, when really you'd been better off going a few years back. So I think ways to address this are get your Key Stage 2 experts to come in and speak to secondary leaders. Get the Vicky Priddles and Kira Mackles of the world, or just your feeder school. They'll know loads more. Attend the sessions. Read the books. The things like Maths Comp will say sort of the key stage it's aimed at, which I think is wrong. It's the key stage that the maths is. It's not the key stage that of who it's aimed at. I would learn as much from a Key Stage 2 session as I would from any other session, because I'm teaching after that key stage. So the maths is Key Stage 2, but it's relevant to me because My kids would have gone through that journey already. We've got a school next year, really excited about this, that's hiring a Key Stage 2 specialist for the secondary school to do this intervention. See if that's a possibility, or see if you can do some job sharing or some swaps, or something like that. And the other thing the amount of time and effort that goes into Year 11 intervention. The issue here is that students have been taught at the wrong point for 4 years. You go, oh God, their grades aren't very good. Quick, let's blitz them for a year and see what happens. Well, if you flip that and did the intervention at Year 7, then you're going to spend the next 4 years, 8, 9, 10, 11, building on actual solid ground because you fixed all those issues from beforehand. So you shouldn't need to do anything at Year 11. So, yeah, it's a fault in my teaching still that I don't know enough to go into a primary school and talk about their maths. Secondary, no problem. But the amount of stuff I don't know scares me sometimes, because someone talking about counting for half an hour and I can have my jaw on the floor. It just that shouldn't quite be right. And I'm convinced the more we know about it at secondary, the better our students' outcomes will be. So yes, learning does not start at Year 7.
This is another biggie here. When you sent these tips through, I thought this tip was going to be the exact opposite of what you've described, which I find fascinating here. So Joe Morgan did a piece of like a video on YouTube that's completely free and available. I'll link to it, which was aimed at secondary teachers, showing them all the things that kids know in Year 6. Well, sorry, all the things kids have experienced in Year 6. And it's frightening, right? Like, you see some of the depth of math and you're like, whoa, okay. That's essentially our Year 7 scheme of work, as, 80% of it has been covered at Year 6. So what I thought you were going to say, and as I say, I found this fascinating, was be aware what kids have done at Year 6, so make sure the work at Year 7 is more challenging. So, have a look at your Year 7 scheme of work. Don't bother spending ages on place value because they've done it for the last 3 or 4 years. Let's crack on with a bit of algebra and so on and so forth. But my interpretation is it's almost kind of the opposite. It's make sure that understanding really kind of is secure. And I guess my kind of follow-up to that is how? Is like does it mean our kind of checks for understanding need to be better? And if so, what do they need to look like? Is it a case of not assuming just because they've covered things for 3 or 4 years that they know it? And my fear with that is the Year 7 scheme of work essentially becomes the Year 6 scheme of work, and then we know kids get a bit kind of bored and switched off because they're doing the same maths that they've done in primary. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And this won't apply to all the students, but that video for Joe that says all the wonderful things that they have done, great. It just means there's going to be some kids that have got so many misconceptions about so many things. Yeah. Within the classroom, things probably don't need to change. I'm probably talking about the bottom, attainment-wise, 5 to 10% of your students. The fact that you can go through 5 years of secondary school, there are some things outside of your control, illness and attendance and things like that, fine. But where you've got a student that's got good attendance and a good attitude and is in your sort of low set Year 11 and can't do basic maths, something's gone wrong. And I would just shift intervention. Whatever time and effort and energy goes into Year 11, put it into Year 7 and fix it then. It doesn't need to rearrange your whole schemes of work, because largely students will be successful. This isn't about every Year 7 student. It's just about being aware, and we're so aware of misconceptions at secondary. We know what kids have learned. We know how they've mastered it, and we look out for them, and we make sure we go back just the right level before teaching expanding double brackets. We know all the little things to look out for around multiplying the negatives and the coefficients and are they going to square the powers and all that. But we don't know when it comes to adding or multiplying and things like that, so we just need to upskill ourselves a little bit by going back further and invest that time in those students. Not everyone. Don't rewrite the entire Year 7 scheme of work, but put something in place to work on those students. Otherwise, they're going to spend 5 years not doing anything. They're trying their hardest, and it's just not pitched at the right level. And the same way that, yes, they might have learnt it. Trigonometry is on the Key Stage 3 curriculum now. Doesn't mean when I start teaching Year 10, I'm going to assume they all know how to do it. So just invest time in yourselves, in your department, in learning about what happens at Key Stage 2. This probably applies for any subject as well. And then spend time in Year 7 identifying those students. And if you're going to put on a masterclass for Year 11 students, do it for Year 7 instead, and give them 4 years of better learning, rather than waiting till the very end. You go, oh, they still can't do it. Yeah, well, no wonder.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask you an awkward question now, right? So we know that there's a bit of a recruitment crisis in maths. We know that the majority of departments probably, you'd be lucky if you've got maths specialists teaching all the classes. Maybe you've got teachers from other subjects doing a little bit of maths teaching here and there. Maybe you've got a lot of part-time teachers with split classes and so on and so forth. What invariably happens is that your strongest teachers tend to put on Year 11 classes, because there's this push for exam success and so on and so forth. And that seems to trickle down that Year 7 almost becomes a bit of a kind of hodgepodge, where you've got, split classes left, right and centre, the PE teacher, the geography teacher's teaching a bit of this and so on. But it's very hard to break that cycle, because if you invert it for 1 year, maybe your GCSE results go down, and then there's all kind of pressure and so on. So working within the constraints that we know we have, how would you allocate staff? Would it be strong on Year 11, strong on Year 7, and then kind of Year 9, just kind of that's where the trouble comes? Being realistic, how do we do it? How do we solve this?
So linking back to tip number 2, around leaving a legacy and having structures in place, as long as you've got a solid person looking after each year group, you only need 5 in that sense, then whatever routines and structures and things are in place are then embedded. And if you've got a PE teacher, because of your legacy, because of your brand, and because of all those things, you're mitigating as much as possible for all those things. But you are touching on another really important point, which is, like, ethically, what's the right thing to do? Let's say you had, so the grades now are numbered, right? 9 to 1. Let's say you had 1,000 grades to give out to 200 pupils. I've made the numbers awful for myself. But would it be ethical to give everyone to attempt to work in a way that gives everyone a 6, where you ignore the people that are doing better than that, and you put all your time and energy into those on 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s? Or are you aiming for a normal distribution? Or are you saying that if you're on an 8, I don't really care about you anymore, because 8, 9, you have the same life chances broadly, and I want to get my 3s to a 4? Or are you saying that if you don't get these kids 9s, they can't get into Oxford, and they can't become the next Einstein, they can't do this? Because we've got limited resources. You have to decide. Which is tricky as schools are state schools. Parents don't choose. They don't choose the ethos that they send their students to. You have to do that for them. And I've worked in schools where the priority is 4+.
Yeah.
4+, 7+. That's sort of it.
Yeah.
And then if someone's on a 5, you just sort of ignore them, because 7+ is your A-level grade, and 4+ is your sort of large life chances grade. And you have to decide where you want to divert your energy and your best teachers and your resources. And I don't know what the perfect answer is to that, but the current system we have in place, when you have intervention, sort of aimed at that 4+ and aimed at that top set, probably most of the time. I don't know, is that right? You've got kids that are on a grade 1, you sort of go, well, don't worry about them, they're not going to get a 4 anyway. Well, should we try and get them a 2? I don't know. You have to decide ethically, philosophically, for yourself, either as a head teacher or as a head of department, where and how you want to allocate these resources. And if you have a bump in GCSE results 1 year, but you know that in 2 years' time everyone's going to increase, do you do it? Because it's one of the toughest decisions I think you need to make is where do you put your resources. I think it's a very long way of me not answering your question.
No, it's good. It's a tricky one.